Tom Hanks had been on thousands of stages in his life. He knew how to be present. He knew how to hold a room. He knew, above everything else, how to stay in control of the moment. But nobody stays in control when a dead man starts speaking. The Late Show that Thursday was running exactly as planned. Tom was there promoting a new project, relaxed in that way that made you forget you were watching one of the most famous people on Earth. Stephen was sharp, warm, the conversation easy and alive. The audience was with them completely. Everything was where it was supposed to be. Tom's phone was in his jacket pocket, silenced. He always silenced it before tapings. 30 years of television had trained that reflex into him completely. Which is why, when it buzzed, he felt it like something wrong. He glanced down during a moment when Stephen was addressing the audience. His son Colin's name was on the screen. Tom had 3 children. Colin knew better than to call during a tapping. They all did. The fact that he was calling meant something. "I'm sorry," Tom said, and the apology was so natural, so unperformed, that the audience immediately understood this wasn't a bit. "My son is calling. He wouldn't call unless, can I just—" "Of course," Stephen said immediately. Tom answered. He turned slightly in his chair, not quite away from the cameras, not quite toward them, just a man answering his phone. "Colin, what's wrong?" The studio was very quiet, not the held breath quiet of anticipation, the quieter quiet of people trying not to intrude on something private that had arrived in a public place. Colin's voice was audible through the phone speaker, not clearly, not every word, but enough. The tone of it. The particular quality of a voice that is trying to hold itself steady and not entirely succeeding. Tom listened. His expression moved through several things in the space of about 15 seconds. Something that looked like confusion, then something that looked like recognition, then something that had no name, the specific expression of a person receiving information that reaches past the present moment and lands in a place that has been waiting a very long time. "Say that again," Tom said quietly. Colin said it again. Tom closed his eyes. Subscribe and leave a comment, because what Colin found and what he read on that phone call is the part that stopped the entire studio cold. When Tom opened his eyes, he was looking at something beyond the studio, beyond the cameras, beyond the present Thursday evening in Manhattan. He was looking at something only he could see. "Where did you find them?" he asked. Colin's answer took a moment. Then Tom nodded slowly, as if the answer made complete sense, as if some part of him had always known they existed somewhere. "How many?" Tom asked. Another answer from Colin. Tom's hand, the one not holding the phone, pressed flat against his chest, the involuntary gesture of someone trying to hold something in that wants to come out. Stephen had not moved. The audience had not moved. The floor director was standing with her clipboard at her side, not looking at it. Everyone in the studio understood, without being told, that whatever was happening was more important than the rundown. "Can you read me one?" Tom asked. His voice had changed completely. The polish was gone, the professional warmth, the 40 years of perfected presence. He sounded like someone's son, just that, someone's son asking to hear his father's voice one more time. There was a pause on Colin's end. Then Colin began to read. The letter was dated 1987. Tom had just made big. He was 31 years old. His father, Amos Hanks, the truck driver, the man with the calloused hands, the man Tom had never found the words to honor while he was alive, had sat down somewhere in some truck stop or at some kitchen table and written a letter to his famous son that he never sent. Colin read it slowly, carefully, the way you read something aloud when you understand that the words are not yours but you are responsible for them now. The letter said, "Tommy, I watched your movie last night at the drive-in outside of Fresno. I had to park away from the other cars because I was making too much noise. I'm not embarrassed to tell you that. A man is allowed to cry when he watches his son become something great. I don't have the words for what I felt. I have never had the words for things like that, which is probably why I'm writing this down instead of calling you. You were always better with words than me. I just want you to know that I understand now what you were reaching for all those years. I didn't always understand it when you were young. I thought acting was a fragile thing to build a life on. I was wrong. What you do is not fragile. It is the opposite of fragile. It holds people together. I have watched strangers cry at your movies and I have thought my son did that. My son reached into a person he never met and found something true. I don't know how you learned to do that. Maybe you were born with it. Maybe I gave it to you without knowing. Either way, it is yours now, and you should know that your old man is proud in a way that words don't reach. I love you, son. I should say that more. Love, Dad." Colin stopped reading. The studio was completely silent. Tom Hanks was crying. Not the polished tears of a performance, not the managed emotion of a man who knows cameras are watching, the real kind, the kind that comes from a place so deep that control is simply no longer available. His shoulders were moving. His hand was still pressed flat against his chest. He was not trying to compose himself, and he was not succeeding, and none of that mattered at all. Stephen stood up. He walked around his desk, the desk he sat behind every night, the desk that represented the formal structure of everything the late show was supposed to be, and he stopped beside Tom's chair and put his hand on Tom's shoulder and stayed there. That was all. He just stayed there. Tom looked up at him, then into the camera, then back at nothing in particular, at the middle distance where grief lives when it finally finds its way out. He never sent it, Tom said. His voice was wrecked and clear at the same time. He sat down and he wrote that, and he never sent it. Stephen didn't say anything. He kept his hand on Tom's shoulder. I spent so many years, Tom started again. I spent so many years thinking he didn't understand, thinking the distance between his world and mine was something he couldn't cross, and he crossed it. He crossed it alone in a truck stop in Fresno watching a movie I made, and he wrote it all down and he put it in a box and he never told me. He pressed his fingers against his eyes for a moment. When he lowered his hand, his face was open in a way that famous faces rarely are, stripped of everything that wasn't essential. Every layer of performance and protection gone, just a man. Why didn't he send it? Tom said, not to Stephen, not to the audience, to no one, to the question itself. It hung in the studio air without an answer, because there was no answer, because fathers don't always send the letters. Because some things get written in truck stops and folded and placed in boxes and found 30 years later by sons who are now old enough to understand what they contain. This is the moment that nobody in the studio and nobody watching at home ever saw coming. Stephen spoke, quietly, carefully, the way you speak when you understand that the words need to be exactly right. He sent it, Stephen said. He just needed Colin to deliver it. Tom looked at him. Something moved across his face, not the grief leaving, but something arriving alongside it. The particular expression of a person who has just been given a way to hold something that was previously impossible to hold. He looked at the phone still in his hand, Colin still on the other end. You still there? Tom asked. Colin's voice audible to everyone. Yeah, Dad, I'm here. How many letters are there? 11, Colin said. One for every year after Big. He wrote one every year. Tom closed his eyes again. 11 years of letters. A truck driver sitting down once a year to write to his famous son about what he'd seen, what he'd felt, what he couldn't say out loud. 11 attempts to cross the distance. 11 letters folded and kept and never sent. Read me another one, Tom said. When you have times, not now, but don't put them away. I won't, Colin said. Okay, Tom paused. I love you, son. Love you too, Dad. Tom ended the call. He sat for a moment with the phone in his lap. Then he looked at the audience, all of them really looked, the way you look at people when the usual barriers between you and other human beings have temporarily dissolved. I'm sorry, he said. The audience responded, not with applause, not yet, but with the sound of a room full of people who recognized something, who had their own boxes, their own unsent letters, their own distances that had never been crossed in time. Stephen went back to his desk. He sat down. He looked at Tom. 11 letters, Stephen said quietly. 11 letters, Tom repeated. He showed up every year, Stephen said, just privately, on paper. He showed up every year and told you what he couldn't say out loud. Tom looked at him for a long moment. Yeah, he said, he did. The show didn't continue the way it was supposed to after that. There was no more film promotion, no more prepared questions. They simply talked about fathers who couldn't say the thing, about sons who didn't know they were loved in ways that never got spoken, about the boxes we find too late and the grace of finding them at all. When the episode aired, the response was immediate and enormous. Not because of the celebrity, because of the box. Because everyone who watched had some version of a box, something unsaid, something undelivered, something folded and kept by someone who loved them in ways they never found out about until too late or not at all. Tom read all 11 letters over the following weeks. He had them transcribed and bound, one copy for each of his children. On the inside cover he wrote, "From your grandfather who crossed the distance on paper when he couldn't do it any other way. Read them when you need to know that love doesn't always arrive the way we expect it to. The drive-in outside Fresno where Amos Hanks watched Big and cried alone in his truck closed in 1994. But the letter he wrote that night traveled 37 years and found its way home. Some things always do. If this story moved you, like this video and subscribe, because some fathers write the letters they can never send. And sometimes, somehow, they arrive anyway.